First, thanks to everyone for being here on the call. This is the first of this new series of webinars for DPMs, and I'm assuming that folks all got to this. They were made aware of this either through their chain of command or when they saw the release of the new DPM resources that went out in the cross connection last week. That, of course, included a new Disaster Program Management Fundamentals course, which replaces what used to be the old ESPMO, as well as some additional resources, a new DPM onboarding guide, a new update to the continuum of learning, and this webinar series. So this series is really designed to be an interactive learning experience for new DPMs, DPSs, senior DPMs, RDOs, functional DPMs, really anyone in a program management role in a chapter or region. So that being said, I want to very much thank our facilitator for today, Susie Davidson. I'm going to pass it to her in just a moment, but for those of you who don't know Susie, she has a long and very impressive history with the Red Cross, and currently she is a leadership volunteer who does just about anything and everything that one could imagine to continue our mission and support not only her local chapter and region, but the national organization as well. So, Susie, I'm going to pass it to you, and I will be attending to the slides here. Thank you.
Okay, so let's move ahead and go to slide 2. Okay. Okay, thank you, Mike. So this is an overview of how we're going to do this walkthrough today. We are going to attempt to do some creative introductions. We will go over objectives, key points of what we want to see covered today, and key points of the onboarding guide that went out in cross connections last week. We're going to do a very high-level onboarding guide walkthrough. We'll be taking questions, so please, those of you that are used to using the chat function, you may ask your questions in chat, and Mike will be monitoring that as well. And then there's some additional resources for you for more information, and we'll have a short time for questions and answers or in discussions. Our goal is that this would be an hour or less, and we're going to try to keep to that time frame as we go forward. Next slide, Mike. So since and I think Mike gave an introduction for me, I do quite a bit with training and development at national headquarters in working with all facets up there, and I'm with the Ohio Buckeye region, and I also do volunteer with my local chapter, and I started as a volunteer, became an employee, retired, and am back to volunteering. So I believe in the mission with a passion. So since we have at least 111 attendees, what we'd like to try to do is to be a little creative, and Mike, you can help capture some of this stuff. What I'd first like to ask is those that are from the Northeast division, if you would click on the raise your hand button, and we will check and see how many are here from the Northeast division. So to get to thank you. To get to that, you move to the top of your screen, you click on the participants box, and when the list of participants come, at the bottom you will see a hand, a check mark, an X, forward and backward arrows, and a smiley face. So if you are from the Northeast division, just please check the hand as we move forward. I see about four hands that were checked. If you will remove your hands for me, and if you are from the Mid-Atlantic division, would you please raise your hand? Thanks, Aaron. looking for the...
I actually have a handful of people with us here that were having trouble getting on.
Okay, is this Aaron?
That's correct.
Okay, so you've got about 5 or 6 additional people with you. Are they DPMs, DPSs, and or leadership volunteers?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, let's see a few of those. If you would raise or lower your hands from the Mid-Atlantic. Thank you all for doing that. Those that are from the Southeast Division, is that called SWARM? Am I correct, Mike?
Correct.
Okay, so those are from the SWARM Division. Please raise your hand. Or I see somebody put a check mark in. That'll work as well. Okay. Not too many. All right. How about lower your hands, please, if you're from the SWARM Division. And those that are from the Crossroads Division, would you raise your hand? Okay, not too many there. All righty. Please lower your hand. Those that are from the, is it the Northwest? Dave Gutierrez's division. If you will raise your hand, please. The one that Melissa Myers is in.
That's North Central Division.
North Central Division, thank you. Okay, I don't see many hands raised there, but a few. All righty. And how about the division that's Charles Blake's division? Lower your hands if you're from North Central and raise your hands if you're from Charles Blake's division. Okay. Lower your hands, please. And if you're from the Pacific Division, please raise your hands. So we really didn't get a lot of people raising hands at all. So I'm going to do this one other way.
So you still haven't called on Southeastern Caribbean yet?
Oh, okay, Southeastern Caribbean. Do we have a boatload on there?
Hey, Susie, it's Chris Baker calling from Georgia. We're having technical difficulties, but I'm in a room full of DPMs and functional leads.
Okay, thanks, Chris. All righty, good. Can you see the PowerPoint, or are you just listening on the phone?
We're just listening on the phone for now.
Okay, all righty. All right, thank you all. If you lower your hands, I'd like to do one other quick introduction. Those of you that are either DPMs and or DPSs, would you please raise your hand? I have one in the room sitting with me that's raising his hand. Okay, thank you. Quite a few of those. Thank you very much. If you'll lower your hand on that one. And if you are a volunteer leadership person, would you raise your hand? Okay,
We're unable to see the screen, the WebEx screen.
Okay, gotcha. All righty. And if you are a regional disaster officer or a senior DPM, could you raise your hand? Okay. Lower your hands for that one. And the last one I'll ask is if you're a divisional staff, would you raise your hand? Okay. Still not seeing some divisional staff raising their hands, and I see some divisional staff names. So we'll have a list of those that have attended. So what I wanted to just share is that we have a good mixture from across the country, from division staff through RDOs, down through DPMs, DPSs, senior DPMs, as well as volunteer leadership. So thank you very much for being on the call. And let's move to the next slide, Mike. All right, so here's our objectives that we want to cover today. So I'm not going to read it, but I do want to emphasize the fourth bullet down, the third bullet down under the upon the completion of the webinar. Understanding the format and parts of the onboarding guide and how to use it. So we will be doing a walkthrough of this guide for you and be able to answer some quick questions on how to use the guide. Next slide. So the key points that we're looking at, we're going to look at key points as a whole. We realize this document is long. It's a large document. There are almost 300 pages. However, several of the pages are separate documents that have been included. As an example, 50 or 60 pages are other resources that have been included. The example would be the employee handbook. And I would like to point out that when you're looking at page numbers in the onboarding guide, you need to look at the page numbers at the top of the pages, because the page numbers at the bottom of your page, of your document, will be page numbers of those additional documents that we've included and inserted in this document. Just want to mention that the other documents don't belong to Disaster Cycle Services. Someone else owns them, and they're responsible for publishing them. So there may be outdated or contradicting data, and I want you to please defer to the most recent source for information. An example would be the table of organizations that are included that are from another document that do have some outdated pieces of information on there. Okay, I want to make a note, a special thanks to the Crossroads Division, which originally built this compilation of resources. So thanks out to Crossroads. Next slide. Just as a reminder, this is a job tool. It's a resource to assist. Onboarding is not a standalone document. You will have links to connect to other resources. You'll have a list of other resources in the back. The additional documents that are included in this document also have resources as well. There can be a risk of just using this document improperly. If you just take this document and give it to someone and say, let's talk about it in 6 months, that is actually not the use that we would like for you to do with this document. We want you to recommend having a fixed recurring time for questions. I want you to chat with your supervisor, whether you need it or not. There'll be documented items to discuss. You can discuss them through emails if you're remotely away from your supervisor. You can arrange meetings with other key leadership, include volunteer leadership in your meetings as well. Next slide. So the walkthrough that we're going to do is covering the 8 sections that are in the onboarding guide. And these are the 8 sections that are listed. The one that is particularly important to all of us is number 5, which is the Disaster Cycle Services Development Plan, and has, and we'll actually walk through that. I think you'll really like that. Each segment is separate and independent. Again, the meat is in section 5. Other areas that are included in this might not be new to you. And again, I'm just giving you a reminder. Page numbers for the complete onboarding document are at the top of the document. Bottom page numbers are for other documents that are included in this. Next slide. All right, so we're going to take a look at each section, and the bullet point that it's important here for me and for you is we're not to learn the information, but to learn its purpose and how to utilize the information. Next slide. All right. So the first one is fundamental principles and mission, vision, and values. A lot of this is not going to be new to most of you, if not all of you that are on the phone. Again, it's just seeing this will be a reminder, and if you have any additional questions about that, then have some questions with your supervisor about that. That's what's in section or segment number 1. Next slide. Section number 2 is the new employee onboarding checklist. It's mostly HR management. It's not specific to disaster cycle services, but it does break tasks into phases. A reminder, this is a general industry practices. Disaster cycle services persons may need to onboard a little quicker, and I have an example that's on the next slide. So this is your new employee onboarding checklist. It's just an example of what is in the document. You can see at the upper right-hand corner, this is page 7 of 260 for the onboarding guide. And if it's a separate document, it'll say page 1 at the bottom, which is the new employee onboarding checklist. And as you move through that document, you'll see page 2 of that, page 3, et cetera, et cetera. So this is an example of what is in section 2, the new employee onboarding checklist. Any questions about that? The next slide is also an example. Phase 1 pre-arrival. Whoops, okay, I'm good. All right, so we're going to go to our next segment, which is Disaster Cycle Services New Employee Orientation Guide. And it does start on page 11 in the document, if you're following through with the document. And so this section covers information that would benefit anyone in disaster cycle services. It's not specific to a job orientation. There are some references from Richard Reed, who was a previous employee of Red Cross, and that's included as is. So this is a document that is included as is. We are not the owners of this document. Okay, so again, I want to mention there's some information in this piece here that does mention SABA, where as our reference back to recent, current, updated information, of course, if it mentions SABA or Learning Management System, we're going to be very specific about EDGE because that's what is out. There is a disaster training email address. If you have any questions about that, you can email to disaster training. And again, we also want to encourage you to learn about Skype for Business with this as well. Next slide. The next slide covers position descriptions and starts on page 33 in the guide. My recommendation, and I'm sure that Mike will agree with me, is that you read all of the job descriptions, and that way you get a picture of what others are doing as well. These are updated current documents for job descriptions dated March of 2017. So please make sure that you read through yours as well as everyone else's as you're going through segment 4 under positions descriptions. Any questions about this segment? All right, let's move on. As we mentioned earlier, this is going to be the meat of the document. It is your Disaster Cycle Services Development Plan. It begins on page 57. It covers onboarding of your very specific job function. It includes questions for you to answer. It has recommended tasks for you to do. It covers operations as well as training, and it represents a week to focus on key areas. Those of you that have been around a while and utilized a Quick Start Guide in the past, this is somewhat similar to the Quick Start Guide, where it has this is what we're going to cover this week. This is your topic. Here's some questions that you need to get answers to. Here's some resources that you can use to get answers to those questions. Here are some questions, topics for discussion with your supervisor, and then there's a blank space for you to capture additional questions that you'd like to ask. So we actually are going to talk about a couple different sections, and we have some examples to look at. So the next slide, Mike. All right. So again, some of the topics are on the right-hand side of the slide, and I've already mentioned about the questions that you can answer at the end of your week. Please, one of the important things is to schedule weekly meetings with your supervisor to discuss your progress, to answer questions, any questions about this slide? All right, the next slide does show an example, and if you have the guide in front of you, you actually can scroll through each of the week sessions and you can see what we're offering. There's Orientation Day, there's Humanitarian Services, there's Volunteer Services, there's Disaster Cycle Services, and especially for that one, it says, where can I find Disaster Cycle Services updates, and where can I find the most current Disaster Cycle Services resource? So each one of those topics that I was reading off to you, as well as several more that I'm not going to mention, are all a week in the process of your onboarding. The other thing that I want to offer up too is that we have a new position that is available for support for disaster program managers, senior disaster program managers, as well as disaster program specialists. And that's James Tittle, who is called the Disaster Workforce Readiness Force Manager, and he will also be able to be a resource if you have any questions that you want to get some additional answers for. Mike, do you want to add anything about James as a resource?
I actually think James is on right now, although I'm not sure if he was able to get in on the audio. James, are you there? Okay. So, yeah, James came from the field. He was an RDO in Oklahoma and Arkansas region. And his role is basically to provide direct support to the field, and his focus for that direct support is on DPM and DPS positions. So that means a few different things, and he's still kind of developing exactly what that means. But, you know, one of the things he's really responsible is being kind of a conduit for information, questions, concerns, that kind of thing in both directions. You know, not only information that's being pushed down from an organizational or a DCS level, but also to kind of get the pulse of the field and push that information back up the chain as well.
Okay. And he and I actually talked this morning, and I told him I was going to mention his name as a resource. Okay. All right, next slide. I just think this section 5, though, is really great because it does have questions, and it gives you links for you to go to answer those questions or to get the most updated answer of the question in case some of the other documents that were in the onboarding guide are outdated, and you'll be able to get to the right spots to get the answers. And leaves you room to really answer or ask some additional questions when you meet with your supervisor. Okay, next slide.
Susie, before we go on, I have a question from the chat window that I'll share. I think it's appropriate on this slide.
Okay, go right ahead.
The question is, collaboration with other departments for the onboarding is needed as well, correct? For coordinating schedules during onboarding and such. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, repeat the question again, please.
Sure. collaboration with other departments for the onboarding is needed as well, correct?
Correct. Several of the areas that you're going to be looking at in that segment 5, that's that whole meet, do address other departments. And so I would, have that conversation with your supervisor, and you may want to meet with those other departments before the end of the week, and then when you meet again with your supervisor, you can talk about how that went with meeting other departments. So you will need to look at other departments within your region that you would want to have conversations around. Volunteer services, SAF, so it's listed up there as well. Okay, all right, thanks. And thanks for the question. All right, then this is segment 6, which is the Red Cross Employee Handbook. You'll see that started on page 94 of your guide, and at the top, remember, look at the top of the page for the page 94, the bottom of the page number 4, the Red Cross Employee Handbook. This section includes HR policies and expectations. It is developed by HR. It is not a document that Disaster Cycle Services owns as well. Again, the last bullet there are some state-specific supplements depending on your local employment laws. So there's a link. So check the link to see if your state has one. So, all right, next slide. Maps and organizational charts. Now, this is where you will have some outdated information in your document. Organizational charts are a snapshot in time. They are not exactly accurate as of today. So you need to be up to date with that information, stay current, check your cross connections, check your conversations with your supervisors so that, people come and go, and we want to make sure that we have the right person that's working in the right slot, and their job titles may even change, because those are the persons that you're going to go to for some support and to get some answers to some of your questions. And so you want to make sure that you have that most current information. The regional maps and organizational charts that are in the document, to my knowledge, when I looked at them, seem to be current, but the organizational charts are not current. Okay. Next slide.
Yeah, that's correct, Susie. And I'll add that the org charts are in the process of being updated right now. And when they are, we will update the orientation guide as well as the Disaster Program Management Fundamentals course where those are referenced as well.
Excellent. And when those are updated, will that come out in the cross-connection?
Yeah, it'll definitely be posted on the Exchange and the Training Index, and we may release it in a push via the cross connection as well.
Okay, thanks. All right.
But as with any of our training materials or onboarding materials, we would encourage anyone who's getting ready to use it to go to the Exchange to download the most recent version rather than relying on something that you have on your computer or in a binder on your shelf.
That's a great point, Mike, to bring out because of all the updates that are happening and all of the new training that's happening. And I will just share too, if you have any training questions, make sure that you take a look at the training neighborhood as well and the training index to make sure that if you have questions that it's regarding the most current training that's out there, because those are changing almost every day. So kudos to the training and development team. All right, I'm on section 8, helpful items. And that starts with page 66. So we've also included information around that whole disaster cycle services core and pillar processes models, some fact sheets, some style guides, guidance for your email signature, that whole brand information, photo library instructions, and a nice piece of information about the Exchange content type with definitions, and how to subscribe on the exchange, how to search on the exchange. I will say it's much, much better today than it was several years back in the past. And also, again, check with your supervisor for any other items that your region is utilizing that they would want you to make sure that you have included when you're onboarding. So again, on this slide 8, it's a compilation of pre-existing resources, and also, I don't know if many of you know, but we do have a map catalog that includes weather hazmat catalog of links and state information for maps as well, that can give you some information. Okay, next slide. Where to go for further information. So one of the things that we don't want you to forget about is information for your peers and volunteers. Make sure that you do utilize them, your volunteer leadership, and again, your direct supervisor, whatever your chain of command might be, the exchange, and all of those training courses. And this is where I want to mention the continuum of learning. It's just been newly updated, and as courses change and requirements change, we will continue to provide you with an updated continuum of learning, but it covers, here's some things you want to look at and do within the first, if you have less than 6 months, 3 to 9 months, 6 to 12 months, and 10 to 24 months. Some suggestions of things that you could be doing. Let's see. Again, what are your next steps? That's the next slide. All right. Again, what are your next steps? So some guidelines and some information, some examples would be use that continuum of learning document, check out all of the information that tells you and gives a good overview and explanation and some tools to use for the mentoring program. Strive for the certifications system. Those of you that do not know about the full certification or the associate certification for disaster program manager, please check the exchange and you can begin to strive to get certified. Go on an assignment, continue with your training, and so you want to increase your level of training and experience, and you can do that in a number of ways with suggestions that we've just made. So that is pretty much all I have. Are there any other questions from the chat, Mike?
Nothing on the chat right now, but I want to encourage folks, you know, one of the reasons that we decided to implement this webinar series was not just to have an information download from, you know, somebody, but also to have an opportunity for an interactive discussion where you can pose relevant questions that, you know, perhaps Susie and I or, you know, another subject matter expert who's on the line can answer, or for discussion with your peers on the phone as well. So we'd really like to open it up. You know, obviously any questions that pertain directly to the material that Susie just covered, we'd love, but we'd really also like to open it up a little bit broader as well.
And before we actually do that open up, I did want to go over, you know, the next several months training. So the next training will be May 9th, and that training is going to be called A Week in the Life of a DPM. Then following that will be June 13th, and it will be Red Cross Administrative Systems and IT. And then following that, the hope is that you will take the Disaster Program Manager Fundamentals course, and following that, then take the Career Goals and Development, which would be July 11th. And then there's a session on the mentorship program in August 8th. And then on September 12th, it's Leading Volunteers and Building Effective Teams. So can't wait for that one. So those are what's up and coming for the series, the DPM DPS webinar series. And so questions, conversation, discussion, yeah. Anyone?
And real quick, Susie, following those 6 that we have scheduled currently in the webinar series, we'll look to refill the schedule. Now, whether that means the same sticks are repeated, or whether it means we start to add or replace some topics, we'll see based on the reception and the demand as we do these first 6. But the intent is that the series, the webinar series itself, continues beyond these first 6. And I will just add, because we've had so many people on today's webinar that were unable to join the audio, we'll probably be looking, this is being recorded and we'll post that, but we'll probably also look to add a second offering of this particular topic sometime within the next couple of weeks. So look out for that if you were unable to join the audio.
Thanks, Mike. Any questions or any conversations, anything anybody would like to share?
I have another question from the chat window, Susie. So the question is, can some of the info be updated with localized information, like pages 15 and 16, for example?
The guides pages or the document pages from another document?
Let's see. I'm not entirely sure, but let me just answer that. In general, yes. The guide is meant to be supplemented with localized information. So you heard Susie mention things like any local organizational charts or maps. But beyond that, there are some appropriate places in there where local information, you know, your local region or chapter may have its own existing onboarding checklist or something like that. And absolutely, the intent is that a new DPM or DPS receives really everything in one place. So if you have localized materials, we would encourage you to add them into this guide and be able to hand it off all as one package. So I have a couple other questions on the chat window, but Susie, maybe we'll give an opportunity for anyone on the phone to ask.
Okay. So I have a question for the group. So those of you that have had an opportunity to take a look at the guide and look at Section 5 specifically, do those topics, those weekly topics, are they something that will be of benefit? Do you think that will help with the onboarding of your DPMs and DPSs? And I'll pick on Chris Baker.
Yeah, and we're printing out 40 copies of it right now. So. Yeah, we've taken a quick glance at it. Nothing in great detail. We happen to be meeting soon anyway as a region. It's something that we can look at together. I mean, fortunately for us, it's rather timely because we have quite a new variety of folks joining us the last few weeks. So it's something useful to use going forward.
Thank you. How about Eric Corliss? Will this be of help for you? Yep, he might not be on there. I thought I saw him on. Okay.
What page is that starting on?
Section 5. So that would be, let me look in the table of contents real quick here.
Lost it.
Oh, that's not it. Let me get my slide, and that will tell me. It is on page 57. We'll start on page 57. So, Mike, what are a couple of the other questions that you had in your chat?
Well,
Next question in the chat is, how can we incorporate cross-departmental staff in DCS knowledge?
In DPS what?
Knowledge.
Oh, in DPS knowledge.
DCS.
Well, you can share some of the information that is in this guide, and certainly there should be opportunities for members of departments to actually maybe meet together to answer questions that other departments might have. I'm not sure, so let's ask this to the group. So group, what is happening within your region that helps in sharing of this information with other departments to share cross-knowledge?
This is Tony. Can you hear me?
I can, Tony. Thanks.
Hey there. So here in the Northeast Ohio region, what we've done is we've established a committee for onboarding of employees, and we basically set up a 2-week schedule to onboard whichever staff, no matter what department they're coming from, to make sure that they're welcomed and introduced to all the, the different sections of lines of service. So for disaster cycle services, we have implemented the use of this guidebook, and, we work with cross departments to make sure that we're able to properly schedule everything so there is a flow to the onboarding process. And that's why I wanted to make sure, that was actually my question about, how can we ensure that cross-departmentally fundraising staff, communications and marketing staff, administrative staff, that they're also introduced to disaster cycle services in case, they need to be brought into the fold if there's something that happens locally.
Okay. I like the idea of your committee. So, and you're already using the onboarding guide?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
So did we provide some additional information that would help you?
Yeah, it actually works out great. I mean, we've been using it, I think, from the first version of it. So, because we're part of the Crossroads division, so we have been using it, and it's been very helpful to us. And this is some of the stuff that helped us start kind of that cross-departmental onboarding process through a committee.
Okay. So, Melissa Myers, let me pick on you. Are you still on the call?
Yep, I'm here.
So do you have any ideas or suggestions to Tony's question of how you can bring in other departments?
Well.
Okay. Are you doing anything within your region?
I personally don't have a whole lot to do with onboarding new DPMs, DPSs, other functional managers, et cetera, et cetera. I was on this mainly for informational to start to learn the materials, so I could be of assistance. So
okay.
I don't have a whole lot of input for you. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's great. Well, I'm glad you were on the call to learn and maybe utilize what you can. So thank you very much for being on the call. Do you have another question, Mike?
Nothing right now.
Okay. Anyone else have a question or suggestion? Information to share or regarding onboarding and what you're doing in your region? Okay, if not, I'll turn this back over to Mike and you can close.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Susie. Really appreciate Susie's time and dedication to the organization and to developing folks within the organization. So thank you, Susie. Also, thanks to the folks who were able to attend today and the lucky ones of you who were able to get in on the conference line. So, we did have some technical difficulties, but I choose to see the positive that the demand was so high for this that we exceeded our capacity. So we'll resolve that for next time. We'll ensure that our capacity on the audio line is enough. And like I mentioned, we'll look to reschedule an alternate option for this particular webinar as well. So I encourage you folks who are on today to try to join the next one and the ones after that. None of them are requirements. We really, again, wanted to provide a venue where not only could a new program manager get some information that was relevant to his or her role, but also have an opportunity to discuss things with his or her peers and some of the facilitators. So I hope that some of you got that out of today. And given that this was our first one, a few little kinks that we'll work out for next time. And I do hope to see everyone on the next call in May. So thanks very much, folks, and hope you all have a wonderful day. Take care.